everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Miscellaneous Gab, where we talk about business, lifestyle, travel, and apparently culture now. In my last video, I did a Hunger Games, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes book analysis. So if you haven't watched that, go check that out. You've inspired me to make another video comparing the books versus the movies. I'm going to talk about the big differences between the book and the movie, as well as what I thought the book did better and what the movie did better. Just like the original Hunger Game books, I would say that this was pretty close to the source material. They didn't really pull a Harry Potter where they left out entire characters, subplots, situations, themes.
Excuse me, I have to go and vomit.
I still am not over what they did to the Half-Blood Prince. Which Harry Potter movie do you think that they ruined the most? If you're a book reader, comment below. I want to know. For me, it's the sixth book. For me, it's the fifth and the sixth book, really. The fifth and the sixth movie were the worst. So this goes without saying, but spoiler alert, if you don't want anything spoiled for you, don't watch this video. Better yet, go watch the movie. Most of this list is actually going to be about what the books did better, because although I really loved the movie, I do think the books did a better job, honestly, as most books do. I think the only book that I actually did not prefer to the movie was Holes, which is a throwback. That being said, the movies certainly do have some redeeming qualities that I appreciated more than the books, or that really helped put the books in perspective. Let's get started with the big differences in the premise of the book. So first things first, the premise of the students and what they're competing in was really different between the movies and the books. So in the books, we open with Corio and he's ready to go. He knows what he's doing. He knows he's going to mentor a student because he knows he's one of the best students and he was handpicked for this. So there's a lot of pride, there's a lot of pressure about how much of an honor this is and how important it is to stand out. In the movies, he thinks he's going to be awarded the Plinth Prize, where he soon finds out that it will not be awarded right now to the best student, but to the most successful mentor. I'm not really sure what purpose that change had in the movies versus the books, or why they really made that change in the first place. If you have a theory, comment below. I do prefer what the books did because it really helped introduce us to the pressure that Corio feels in order to get money to go to university because he is broke. In the movie, it starts with Dean Highbottom telling the kids that your job is to turn these kids into spectacles and not survivors. And that was kind of this predetermined thing. However, in the books, it was significantly different. And you do see that Snow was much more central in orchestrating that based on the paper that he wrote and sort of the thoughts that he had, and actually his collaboration with Dr. Gall in order to institute the gambling system, the sponsors, etc. The big problem in the books is that nobody wants to watch the Hunger Games. Like, duh. These capital citizens that had a good chunk of their livelihood, childhood taken up by war, C-wordism, killing, hunger, starvation, atrocious acts. Go figure that they would not want to watch kids on TV killing each other every single year because why, who, what. I pointed this out in my last video, but I never want to forget how effed up the premise of this book is. And I think it's super important that we all take a moment to acknowledge that even though this is entertainment, this is an alternate reality that we might one day walk towards, or in some ways you could argue we're currently living in. In the book, Dr. Gall, she kind of likes to think out loud. They didn't even know if the Hunger Games was like a viable thing that could keep going. They were still in their beta testing period. It really shows just how instrumental Corio Snow was in creating the Hunger Games as we know it, into making them games. Biggest change by far is the fact that the books is a first-person narration taking the perspective of Corio Snow. Obviously, in the movie, it is a third-person limited perspective because there's no character that is narrating it, so we don't get to see into any character's mind. And even though Snow is obviously the main character, we are never really actually in his head like we are in the books. Narration style can really change everything about the way a story is told. Before we get a more nuanced and in-depth look at Corio, we see his journey unfold a lot more, like I said, nuanced and slower than we do in the movie. movie. Obviously, I would not have wanted the movie to be a long narration because that just wouldn't have worked really in the style of the Hunger Games, but both with the original Hunger Games, it was a first-person narration from Katniss, and this, you do just get to know the characters on a wider and deeper level than you ever would in the movie, and this is important in a few different ways. The books was a really slow burn. It begins with him drinking this cabbage water to cover up the hunger pangs in his stomach because he is literally starving. We really see like what a mask he puts on when more kids are dying, when things are getting chaotic. He starts like shoveling food. He's unable to control himself. So the books, you get a way more measured look at just the amount of control and what a thin grasp he really has on his life. He's always putting on this politician-esque persona. Inside, he's feeling a certain way. So you really get to see his disgust for many things. Snow hates a lot of things and people. He hates Dr. Gall. He hates Dean Highbottom. He hates the districts for the most part. He hates some of his classmates. He hates Mockingjays. He is like constantly shitting on everything in the book. In the movie, of course, we just see this charming actor playing him. Most notable thing we lack in the movie with his perspective is how he sees Lucy Gray and Sejanus. The view of Lucy Gray in the book is so much more possessive. She is his. She belongs to him. These are phrases that are used time and time again throughout the book. She's an investment. She's his ticket. You see her a lot more as a thing. He really just thinks she's gonna die. Like at any point, he's like, oh, well, she won't be here tomorrow. She'll be gone. So really, he's just trying to like milk it and milk her as long as he can. In both the books and the movies, he's very sympathetic towards her, and he clearly cares, even arguably a lot more than his other classmates care about their tributes. She becomes thing/investment/prize to his possessive ownership girlfriend, to the one thing that will stop him from getting back to his normal life. His relationship with Sejanus is way more complex and nuanced in the book, which I really appreciate. No one is really the bad guy until the end, right? It's just like a complicated relationship. Ever since Sejanus arrived when he was like 8 years old, Corio was the only one who was really nice to him since everyone ostracized him and thought of him as district. And so that made Sejanus think that they were friends, but Corio really resented that they were friends. And I don't necessarily think that's like an evil thing. I think any of us can think back to grade school, and if we were like nice to the loser and then the loser liked us, and then we didn't really want our other friends to know that we were friends with the loser. So I don't think that's necessarily bad, but that does help set up the premise of their friendship and of their relationship, that Corio was always reluctantly associated with Sejanus when nobody else really wanted to be. In the movie, they just seem more like buddies, like just buds. Less complicated, really. Another difference between the books and the movie is how much attention and how much we learn about Snow's parents. And there's a little bit of a disconnect between how his father died in the movie versus the books. In the books, it's really clear that he was killed by a rebel from District 12. We also get a lot more insight into the grandmam, who's this xenophobic, nationalist, prideful grandmother who belts out the Pledge of Allegiance every day. She's really disgusted by anything related to the district. So given what happened to Corio's father, given what his grandmam says every day, it might help understand his hatred of the districts. However, I wouldn't necessarily say that this is a Corio thing. A lot of people in the capital have put that cognitive dissonance between themselves and district people by thinking about them as other, as animalistic, as unrefined, and as savage. In the book, you really feel that he feels way closer to his mother. He carries around her compact all the time. He actually doesn't really feel close to his father at all because his father was a distant, absent, and cold man who died when Corio was young. His mother represents like the good in Corio, a possible good path that Corio could walk down. Another thing that I felt like really wasn't fully formed in the movie was Sejanus as a character and the Plinth family in general. In the movie, you get like really small glimpses of the Plinth family when they're picking him up outside of the games. His father isn't really in either. He's kind of this enigmatic figure. Sejanus never really got on with him. His father was always bailing him out of his trouble, buying his way into things. But his mother was a relatively important character in the book. She goes to Corio's house when Sejanus snuck into the Hunger Games, and she is objectively a very sweet and loving woman. She made cookies and food for Corio, who is basically starving half the time. And unfortunately, Corio really just looks at her with a lot of disgust, down on them for any kind of religious and spiritual belief. beliefs. He also looks down on the fact that Sejanus calls her Ma. I guess in the capital, you can only have regal names for your loved ones like Grand Ma'am. It's important to see more of Sejanus's family and who he is and where he comes from. Sejanus and Corio are kind of a foil to one another. I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you agree. We see a lot more of District 12 in the books. Maybe they felt like they didn't need to spend a lot of time on it because we're already familiar with District 12 from the original Hunger Games, but we see a lot more where Lucy comes from. A lot of the characters from the Covey were either minimized or cut out entirely. One thing that I was sad about when I was watching the movie, I wasn't even sure that they would bring the Jabberjay thing in. I was honestly convinced that he would betray Sejanus another way because there was no attention paid to the Jabberjays until they're actually putting them in the cages and sending them back. So there's no explanation for how they work and kind of the history and the lore behind the Jabberjays. I think this is a super important change that they made, or something that they left out. The Jabberjays were a government project during the rebellion to go out into the districts to spy on rebels and to report back to the capital. At some point, the rebels figured out what they were used for and used the Jabberjays to send back false information to the capital, so the capital discontinued their program. The Jabberjays mated with the local mockingbird, creating mockingjays. It's very interesting because Corio is very fascinated by the Jabberjays, and he hates the mockingjay. He hates the mockingjays. Literal visceral disgust of this bird. Like, it is over the top. He hates the mockingjays more than he hates cannibalism. It's important symbolism, I think, that's missed here. In the books, he's leading these missions, talking to his commanders, hey, let's like go kill all the mockingjays and use them as target practice. Corio has this hatred of something that is district versus something that is manufactured, a mutant, which is important, obviously, because of the path he chooses to walk down. Another important thing that was left out was Clemencia's journey. So I felt like this was really rushed in the movie. The director talked about how you can't always include everything, and this was just something that had to go. But in the books, you see way more of Clemmy and what happened to her. It's way more of a thing. She basically turns into a snake, kind of. When Corio is injured from the bombing and the blast, he sees her in the hospital, and she is terrifying. Her eyes are all yellow, they're slit. She has like a forked tongue. She's getting scales all over her. She's like, where are my parents? Why hasn't anybody visited me? Why haven't you told anyone what's going on with me? Like, what is going on? That's actually a really scary scene. And I think it shows the helplessness of the ordinary capital citizen. She's as disposable as the district kids and is being used for Dr. Gall's twisted Dr. Seuss, whatever. Nobody is safe in this world except for the system. It's the capital as a force, which is a super important lesson in today's day and age. So let's think about that. Clemencia comes back during the Hunger Games and she's like totally different. She's way more agitated. There's just like a lot going on with her. She just seems more violent. She's very snake-like. What happened with Clemencia is almost like this dirty little secret between Corio and Dr. Gall. In the books, he's actually terrified to tell anybody because he thinks he will be killed. Kind of shows that the best way to control somebody is to just have them living in fear of their lives at all times. The only other emphasis is like the nuances between the other classmates. Most of the other classmates sucked. Corio is a product of his environment. He's not this bad apple. It's just everyone kind of sucks. Liz Estrada didn't get much face time in the movie, but she's like actually understanding, and she's the one who brings up to Corio, like, I think they're using us to be these mentors, and this is like kind of abusive and terrible to us, and it's not necessarily this great honor. So I liked her. She was cool, and she wasn't really in the movie very much. And then Tigris, I feel like they kind of did my girl Tigris a bit dirty in the movie. They did not give her the time that I felt she deserved, especially with what happens later to Tigris that we see in the original Hunger Games. It makes it all the more tragic because Tigris does so much for Corio. What she even indicates that she maybe did on the black market. She's really his rock, and she is pure good. Tigris had a positive outlook on life. I love how she was portrayed, and I love that actress. I think all that was well. The casting was great. Her presence in his life showed maybe a possible other path for him. Now, let's get into things that the movie did better. Spoiler alert, this is a smaller list, but I really loved the movie. First and foremost, most. Obviously, the thing that the movie did the best was letting the music come to life. A lot of people who read the book complained that there were full-length songs in the book. It just became a lot. It was boring and it wasn't inspiring. And especially if you listen to the audiobook, voice actor did a fantastic job in the audiobook. But when he read out the songs, he was like, "Nothing you can take from me is ever worth keeping. Yeah, no, nothing you can take from me is worth keeping. You can't take this, you can't do that." So it was like a very weird mix between singing and talking. It didn't work. You kind of lose track of like, why is this important? What is this music in here for? Rachel Zegler did such a fantastic job singing. I was blown away to be able to portray a character, but also sing live and in the accent and in character. It was great. That music brought a lot to the movie in general and the story. And honestly, props to Suzanne Collins, because she wrote the book knowing that the music was important, but maybe music is music, right? It needs to be sang, it needs to be played, it needs to be performed. Along with that, I think that Lucy Gray was way better in the movie, where I think we lost something with Snow in the movie. I think we gained something with Lucy Gray. Another thing that the movie did better was Reaper's death and just kind of the Hunger Games in general. Reaper's death in the books, he is the last one to battle it out with Lucy, but she knows that he's rabid. So her goal is really just to exhaust him. Reaper dies from drinking the poisoned water. In the movie, where he surrenders and is being gobbled up by all those snakes, is just beautiful and chilling and horrifying. I love Reaper in general, and I think the actor did a great job portraying him. Reaper was supposed to be like the big bad wolf. In the book, he apologizes to all the tributes. "Hey, sorry, I'm gonna have to kill you." Then the Hunger Games absolutely broke him. He ended up spending more time creating this funeral and this final goodbye to these children rather than going out and hunting them. I don't see what was lost by that change. Lucy Gray singing that song, oh my god, that made me cry. Like the emotion, everything, it was so beautiful. And to that extent, not that the book or the movie is really about the games. I think the movie did such a good job of portraying, here is the OG games. It's rustic, it's horrible, it's barbaric, and it just goes to show that contrast, like how far removed we actually get in the Katniss era game, where the tributes are honored, they're dressed up, they're given princess treatment, all these things, and the games are like really high tech. This was definitely a throwback, and it shows like where the Hunger Games began and how much it's been perverted to make it like this glorious and stylish event of the year. OG Hunger Games is they kidnap children from their homes, they don't feed them, they don't even change their clothes, they keep them in the zoo, and they allow them to be medically treated by a veterinarian, if at all. So that just really helps. One, just always kind of remind us like, hey, this is fucked. Don't forget this is fucked. That's all I have to say on that. Please let me know what you think in the comments. If I missed anything, just let me know. Drop me a line, chat about it more. You know I'm here. You know I want to talk about it. Please subscribe if you enjoyed this movie and you would like more Hunger Games lore or discussion. I've recently gone back and reread all the OG Hunger Games, and I'd love to talk about it. Thank you so much for watching, and have an amazing day.